You know, assumptions are a dangerous thing. And for any business or brand looking to stay relevant or competitive as times change, it is so critical that they stay clearly focused on what their customers, their marketplace, does want and doesn't want, to take the pulse of their consumers or their marketplace. The danger, of course, is not to make assumptions, not to assume that you know what your consumers want because after all, you asked them 7 years ago, or to just rely on a gut feel of what you think would be appealing to your marketplace. It is so critical we avoid the assumption trap. Now, a couple of good examples of businesses that fell into this trap and then other businesses that didn't. Sara Lee, case in point, the cake maker who, a number of decades ago decided to release a brand new range of packet mix cakes. And they assumed that because, of course, in our modern era, women are time poor, the best thing would be to create a cake mix that was as easy and fast to make as possible. So they created a brilliant cake mix that only required you to add water. That was it. And they thought this would be a sure winner. They assumed that's exactly what women would want. Only problem, they didn't sell. And after these cake mixes have been out in the marketplace for a little while, Sara Lee, scratching their head, said, what happened? We thought these would be a sure winner. They went out to the marketplace. They asked the question they should have asked before they actually devised this new product. And they started to ask their consumers basically why they weren't interested in this cake mix. And the general consensus was this. Women would say, well, as a mother, if I'm going to make a cake for my family, I want to feel that it involves some degree of love and attention, even a bit of skill. Just adding water feels too much like cheating. And so they didn't buy this thing that was designed for their convenience because it was almost seen as too convenient to the point of being a cop-out. Sara Lee went, oh, that's interesting. They went back to the drawing board, redesigned their cake mixes so that now you had to add, butter, milk, eggs, and water. And of course, those things require great skill and attention to detail. But as soon as they added those requirements for making a cake, these things flew off the shelves. Women around the world loved their new cake mixes, this revolution in baking, because it was easy, it was convenient, but it still allowed for some skill and involvement from the person making the cake. Subtle difference, but how significant that difference was by asking the question, not relying on assumptions. Now, of course, you look at another example in Harley-Davidson, very different industry, but a similar case study, a similar example. In the 70s, Harley-Davidson sales began to slip. And rather than just staying in the ivory tower of corporate headquarters and trying to navel gaze and come up with a solution as to why the Harley-Davidson was not as popular as it had once been, the marketing department of Harley-Davidson went out into the field. They embedded themselves in riding groups. And the brief they were given was watch, listen, talk to the people who are riding our bikes. Try and get inside their heads, understand what makes them tick, what they do like and what they don't like. And what they discovered is they went out into the marketplace and someone would buy a Harley-Davidson bike, a fairly standard sort of classic shape. They would then spend the same amount of money they'd spent on the purchase of the bike making modifications so that it looked like almost nothing that they'd walked out of the showroom with. It had its different handlebars, extended exhaust pipes, it was lowered and altered and changed. And Harley-Davidson's marketing people said, that's interesting. If that's what our customers want, if that's what they're craving, why don't we make it that way in the first place? And they went back to corporate headquarters, completely re-engineered the design of a Harley-Davidson to take on board some of the things they'd learned from being out in the field. Within 2 or 3 years, their sales had jumped 60%. That is the power of not falling back on assumptions, but going out to your marketplace, asking the questions, but most importantly, listening to the answers. Are you falling into the assumption trap? I hope not.